I'm sure that after the way I greeted Federico, I'm sure that some placeover is going to say that I just asked him to resign. Nothing, these are the jokes with our dirty journalism. Well, good night to all. First of all, I want to express my condolences to the family of Miguel Uribe, Senator and former President of Colombia. Minded to defend the ideas of freedom in his native country. Episodes like that remind us of the true nature of our battle and everything that is at stake. It is an honor to present myself before all of you. It fills me with pride to receive the Freedom Torch Award, particularly because I spent my life in defense of freedom. I want to thank Liberty International for this award and of course also to all of you for your presence. And also to my dear friend José Luis Cordero, that we have a beautiful history in common when I met him at a WEF meeting in Lima. And from there we became great friends. Not to mention the impressive thing that when he made his presentation on freedom and progress, he basically started with a video of the special, The Eternal Life, and the short video that announces a special basically ends with a phrase of José Luis Cordero that says, we are going to see the death of the death. So it is very inspiring for me to have a friend like José Luis. I have said on several occasions that we Argentines are prophets of a dystopian future. Our country has been the laboratory of collectivism for a century and can be used as a case of study of the consequences of the sustained application of economic and social intervention. And the truth is that it is nice to make this reflection at this moment. Having one of the giants that I have as minister, the honor that I have to have was Minister Dr. Federico Sturzenegger, which for me is a true honor, a pleasure to have him within the team. And that together with the enormous team that we have, we are making the greatest transformation in the history of Argentina. Since if we take it by articulation, oh, there is Diego, there, how are you? There is the Diego Ricalda. And if we take all the reforms, looking at it by articulation, there are 8,000 structural reforms. Therefore, we are the most reformist government in Argentine history, and that is thanks to Federico Sturzenegger. After having reached a golden age at the beginning of the 20th century, the Argentine Republic was the victim of a new political class that made social justice its flag. For a century, they subjected the population to a gradual process of impoverishment, marked by dramatic episodes of crises, social explosions, and hyperinflations. On the subject of social justice, I want to make a special mention of a huge work.
Quiero hacer una especial mención a un enorme trabajo,
an exceptional film, which is the recent film of Guillermo Francella's Argentum, a true work of art, given that Diego Ricalda is here. In fact, I not only saw it with a group of deputies who defend their ideas of freedom in Congress, but I also saw it with my ministers. And of the 16 vignettes, there are 11 that truly call for a deep reflection. and the most interesting in terms of the logic of social justice, or one of the most interesting, is the last one, which is called troppo dolce, and which basically prettily poses the problem of social justice. The Italian family, which Fabio Maschella is going to see, are poor, and he had a construction company. So first they steal the wallet with the argument of paying for a wheelchair. And then they refer to principles and values that were going to skim it. It is interesting because when you look at the distribution of income, if you take it by deciles, you could say that there is a very rich decile, and the remaining 9 are very backward. In other words, it makes clear the problem of distribution of income, the problem of inequality in their view, because the Argentine says, no, but I try very hard to get the money, and earn the money that I earn. I do it honestly. And they say, no, but you are rich, we are poor, and you have to give us the money. And they do it in a way, many against one, what Hegel would call, let's say, the tyranny of the majority. It would come to be a lack of tyranny of the majority. It's like that joke, 4 wolves and a chicken get together to vote for dinner tonight. The chicken goes. In other words, limited democracy is Haye's strict reflection. And you see there the violence they exert on the owner of a construction company. They steal all the money and ends up fleeing. And that makes a cucus very violent. Because many of these we show the Argentinians on the one hand, who earn the bread with the fruit of their work, and the criminals who, in some cases, use the state to execute that violent action. But it is clear that social justice is a robbery. It is an unequal treatment against the law. That is, social justice is unjust, it is criminal. And obviously, in dynamic terms, it is perverse. Because if the productive leave and the parasites remain, that place, once it has silenced that person, that is interesting, the dolce troppo. They are going to eat the cucus. And once they have silenced them, they return to the same miserable situation. And obviously this, let's say, in terms of cultural battles, is aberrant and horrible for the cucus, and that is why they are so violent and saying the aberrations they say. Why? Because the film exposes them for what they are, and when they see that the good Argentinians are Fabio Maschella, and when they see that they are the rest of the mafia family, thanks criminals who also sink into decadence, they do not like it, and instead of grabbing and attacking, the causes get angry with the effects. And this is why they are spreading all the leer and saying all the aberrations. But what is interesting about this, the cultural battle begins to flail. And we are beating them, and we are exposing them, and they are going to feel ashamed of being the garbage they are. At the same time, I also talked about the inflationary heresy. And so it was that in December 2023, we received a country on the brink of the worst crisis in history. The truth is that the monetary imbalance prior to the Rodriguez was combined. It was twice the truth. We had the situation in the central bank worse than the one that there was at the beginning of 1989 and the pre-lip and inflation of the Funsin, and we also had worse social indicators than in 2001. That was the heresy we had. And in terms of inflation, the rate of interannual inflation was in the order of 250%, and it was also accelerating. In fact, we reached a point where high-frequency inflation marked 1.5% daily, which, if we also look at the wholesale, the one in December, 54%, and we annualize it 17,000%, it is clear that annualizing, let's say, whether it is a daily data or a monthly data, it seems exaggerated. The reality is that we did not count it from this annualization of the wholesale in December, but we did it taking into account the double of money overhang that we had during Rodriguez, which meant multiplying inflation by 6, with which we would have multiplied it by 12. We had as the situation worse than the previous one of Alfonsin, or basically the wholesale inflation was 5,000%. In addition, we had the equivalent of 9 monetary bases in pesos in the course of 3 months. Therefore, everything would have ended in a colossal explosion of increase in the amount of money there. Surely, with 17,000, 18,000%, they would have pinned on us. In fact, Ayo Korenberg himself also estimated this counterfeit and gave it 18,000%, so that was what they left us. Today, on the other hand, after less than 2 years of government, the reality is different. Interannual inflation has dropped to a rate at 25%, which means that its monthly rate is now around 1.5%. The same thing that used to increase in only 1 day. That is, today we have in 1 month what used to increase in 1 day, and now it is on its way to being completely exterminated by the middle of next year. Thanks to this, we have taken out 12 million people out of poverty, while the indigency is gone from 20.2% to 7.3%. That is the product in numbers, and those who talk about people not reaching the end of the month. Well, if people did not have enough to eat, today there are 6 million Argentine mothers who do have enough to eat. Does it hurt them, or does it not hurt the cockroaches, who have been questioning everything? And all this, despite the constant warnings of the usual doomsayers, who I promised to stop insulting recently. They got tired of saying that we were lowering inflation at the cost of inducing a recession, when in reality our GDP has been rising for 3 consecutive trimesters, with an annual growth of 5.8%. This is also very interesting because first they said that we were not going to be able to lower inflation, which was going to be fixed at 30%. Moreover, I remember that there was a little idiot, a little imbecile, who said that if we did everything right, we would have 400% annual inflation. And also, that is, all the time he said that we did everything wrong. So it seems that the little imbecile hit him a little, not because he is a little imbecile, but because he is small, intellectually safe. But apart from that, later Visada, when they started to see that inflation was going down, they said that we were going to sink the economy into a recession, that we were going to generate a Great Depression. Then they said that the economy wouldn't L. That is, that we were going to fall and that we were not going to recover ever. And we kept saying that we were going to go out in choppy. Well, the truth is that it was not in short fee, it was a tilde, because if one takes the GDP measured by DMI, which is out of station monthly, the date of the month of December 24, ended up 6% above December 23. That is, not only had we managed to lower inflation very strongly, but we also made the GDP grow despite having made the biggest fiscal adjustment in history, 5 in the Treasury and 10 in the GDP. Therefore, it seems to me that many are going to have to start rewriting the tax specs. And that was not only those steps. The first quarter has expanded almost to 6%. The economy in the second is growing at almost 8%. And all this with a huge drop in the number of poor. Indigent continuous improvements in real salaries. The minimum retirement multiplied by 4 times from $80 to $320. The average salary of the economy went from $300 to $1,200. And they still have the arrogance to criticize what in the world is called the Argentine economic miracle. But this is just the first step to change the reality of Argentines in a definitive way. We know that we have not yet reached the poor because their conditions were so disastrous that the necessary work to get out of the pit we were in takes time. The first steps on the path of improvement are the most difficult because we still carry the burden of decades of wrong decisions. That is why I want to thank from the bottom of my heart the effort, the courage and the patience with which the millions of Argentines accompany us throughout this process, even when for many the fruits of this path are not yet seen. We know what Argentina needs: an intense process of deregulation and economic freedom that takes away from society the boot of the state on the neck, Through our chainsaw plan, we began to dismantle a giant and stumbling state that prevented the private sector from being able to deploy all its productive capacity. We have carried out our agenda with the unbreakable conviction that we are doing what has worked in the whole world throughout history, without letting ourselves be carried away by the hypocritical objections of those who brought us here. We are returning to the Argentine Republic its lost glory. As I have already said on another occasion, my objective is not to look good, but to do good. Today, although the worst has happened, the danger is far from being over. Those who want us not to change Argentina will not leave without fighting. As a caste accustomed to living from the effort of others, they resist with the own desperation of those who, minute by minute, see their privileges fade away. That is why they are doing everything they can to turn back time, although that means the total destruction of their compatriots. In some of the recent speeches, I have mentioned a phrase from Sun Tzu, which basically describes the character of a bad ruler. A bad ruler is characterized by the attitude that, in order to retain power, he is willing to set his country on fire and roll over the ashes. That is the Kirchnerism, and against that monstrosity, which is the one we fight and fight day by day very strongly. That is why they try to promote breaking laws that attack the tax surplus, incite violent protests, operate with disinformation campaigns, emotional extortion, and other sabotage maneuvers of the criminal left. Do not doubt that they are doing everything possible to get us out of our axis. Let me assure you that it will not work for them. Our values are not negotiable, and we will not cede a millimeter of our responsibility to the people to make Argentina great again. We will not cede a millimeter to this group of psychopaths. The Argentine Republic is therefore a battlefield where the future of millions of people is at stake, and where two totally antagonistic models of the country are faced. The first is the one we suffered all our lives, the model of the present state, the model of the future of the country, the model of the future of the country, the model of the future of the country, the model of the future of our lives, the model of the present state headed by the Kirchnerism, its worst exponent and main responsible for the deepening of our decline during the last 2 decades, a model of systematic impoverishment and impoverishment that practically decides the civilizatory process that followed the sanction of our liberal constitution, a model that, if continued, will bring back a state of absolute barbarity, an enemy model of production that throughout the country infects the private sector with absurd taxes. For example, when people flee to private security, Kirchnerism puts a tax on the installation of private security posts. In other words, it makes the state penalize a citizen for looking outside the public sector for the security that it does not provide, and that in addition to the really hilarious taxes, such as fees for the patente of animals, fees for pony walkers, the dangerous dog, and even the inflatable advertising dolls. What country can go ahead with these beasts? The one who faces this model better than anyone, as I have already said, is the Kirchnerismo that governs the province of Buenos Aires today, a land of enormous potential that should be a paradise, but which they have transformed into a living hell, having lost the last elections and with its reputation in free fall, for having left the country at the brink of cataclysm. Today it is shared in its most cynical and shameless fashion. Its only motivation is to continue living at the taxpayer's expense. The other model is the one that we propose, the one of the ideas of freedom, the one that transformed us into world power and made us one of the countries with a GDP per capita comparable to any country in the first world. That is why, systematically, since I entered politics, and in honor of my dear mentor, Professor, our top professor of freedom, I have repeated one of his definitions about liberalism, and netted that our bottom model is liberalism is the respect and restricting of the project of the next, based on the principle of non-aggression and in defense of the right to life, to freedom and to property. Thank you, Professor Alberto Venezuelan. That model is the one that elected us as a cultural lighthouse on the continent, and the one that was the promised land of millions of immigrants, fleeing from hunger and war, found in the Argentine Republic the opportunity for a new beginning. This is what is at stake in the upcoming elections. The future of our country. The future of our country. The future of our country. And this is what is at stake in the upcoming elections. The Beninenses have the arduous task of deciding whether to continue on the path of progressive deterioration, or to say no to the lie that Kirchnerism has been selling for decades. This September 7, we invite the Beninenses to sing with us a cry of liberation. We come to say Kirchnerism never again. But this is only the first of the battles that remain this year. For the national elections, it must be clear that in the dichotomy between going forward as a country and going back to the past, there are no third ways. There is no compromise between both models, because we learn from the past that when we opt for a change in means, the project breaks down and we start again even worse than before, with an even more hopeless people and resigned to the destiny of misery that Kirchnerism offers. In short, everything that does not imply an iron commitment to the cause of freedom is irremediably condemned to failure. Because freedom, civilization, and prosperity are tried, and attacking any of the three affects irremediably the other two. That is why I deeply appreciate this award, which I consider analogous to what our administration is doing, which is not more than picking up the liberating torch of our predecessors that they gave us, which we have left in oblivion for a long time as a nation, and we have come to reverse these 100 years of decadence, because we have come to make Argentina great again. Thank you very much to all. May God bless the Argentines, may the forces of heaven be with us, and long life freedom, damn it. Long life freedom, damn it.
¡Viva la libertad, carajo!
Long life freedom, damn it.
¡Viva la libertad, carajo!
Thank you very much.